Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today's Small Business Bootcamp. I'm Robert Theobald, Small Business Ombudsman and Vice President of Small Business Services. And we're glad to have you all with us today. We've got a great presentation in store. As we like to do, we like to post up in the chat real quick where everybody is tuning in from. We like to see where from throughout Arizona and sometimes beyond the Arizona borders we have participants from. So please post that up. I see Eric's from Phoenix. We have Robert from Kingman, Glendale, Mesa, Goodyear, Tucson, Gilbert, Maricopa, Sonora, right, Chandler, Avondale, Payson. You got Sierra Vista. All right, do we have anybody from Yuma? If we got someone from Yuma, we got just about the entire state. We got Scottsdale. We got a great gathering from around the state, so we appreciate everybody. We've got Kelly from Tucson, so Sholo, so thank you. We're going to jump right in. So as we like to do as we start these off, we like to start by thanking all of our community partners. We cannot do these webinars without them, without their time, their efforts, and their expertise. We bring in experts from throughout Arizona to share this information with you, and they're willing to give back to small businesses because they support small businesses, and we're glad to have them and recognize them for their effort. And this is just a small sample of the 200 plus community partners that have presented on the boot camp. So for those that are new to the boot camp, we like to share that the boot camp and content library is designed to help small businesses prepare, plan, and grow. And not only is it our webinars that we do on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m., we will also do, occasionally we do lunch and learns with expert presenters, but all of our webinars, we do them via webinar so we can reach the entire state. So as you saw when I was doing the introductions, we can reach Sierra Vista, and we can reach Sholo, and we can reach Kingman all at the same time and everywhere in between. And so it's an effort to be able to reach the entire state, but then we also record them and we post all the recordings in our content library. And in the content library, you can access over 300 recorded webinars. There's about 360 or so now. And you can access at any time, there's no cost. And the content library can be found on the boot camp homepage at the very bottom of the boot camp homepage. So it's an amazing resource available to you. The ACA also has a number of other programs. If you scan that QR code, it will take you to our programs page, or you can find the link there at the bottom of the screen. But we have other programs that impact manufacturing, small business, innovation, rural, international trade, talent training, tax relief, and more. So our programs page has a ton of information on it. It's a great resource to browse around and see what's available that might help your business. One of those key things on that programs page is our small business checklist. We love to talk about this and tout it. It is an online interactive tool or resource that helps entrepreneurs identify the commonly requested licensing, registration, and compliance requirements at the local, state, and federal level. This is great for people starting a business or expanding a business to see what's required for where they're going to be doing business. Arizona as a state does not require a business license, and every community is left to decide if they want to or not. Some do, some don't, and this checklist will help identify if that piece is required or if there's other state agencies that you need certifications or registrations with. It's an amazing tool. And on that, we also have our virtual assistant, Sally, that can help answer some of those shorter questions that you may have, but for the deep, meaty details, you can dive right into that checklist. Again, that QR code will help you get to the checklist right away. It'll take you right there. Another program that we have we want to talk about, because the applications are currently open, but they close in a couple days, is the Small Business Lending Academy. And this is a 6-week class style cohort. It's on Tuesday afternoons from 3:30 to 5. And there are some requirements in order to participate. We do have only 15 slots available because it's a very intensive course where you're going to get a few $1,000s worth of technical assistance with accounting and legal at no cost to you. That is funded through a federal program that we're doing. And it's designed for businesses that are currently in business, been in business for a year and a half, 2 years or more, that are looking for a loan of under $50,000 to help grow their business. Now, if you're looking for a $75,000 loan, go ahead and apply and you may be able to get in. But it's really targeting that micro loan category. And when you finish this program, you will have a lending ready packet that's ready to give to a lender. And you'll also meet some lenders in this program. So we're currently accepting applications. I will post the link for that in the chat in a bit. But I just wanted to share that with you, and you can find it on our programs page as well under Small Business Academy. We'll take you to that information. So looking at some of our upcoming, of course, this is today's session on the 25th, but on April 8th is our next session. If you notice, we did go to every other week on the boot camps. And so the next one is how to optimize LinkedIn. So we're excited to talk about LinkedIn again. We haven't done that in a couple of years, so it is a great tool for many of you. So we hope you can join us for that. But you're all here for today's session. So we're excited to have Jonny Holsten. He's the CEO and founder of South Mountain Messaging, and they rebranded to Bridge Selling. He's been on with us before. We're excited to have him back, along with his team that you see on the screen here. So welcome. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. A little bit of housekeeping is we like to use the Q&A that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. That helps us identify all the questions you may have, and then we can use the chat for interaction that there may be with the panelists. So again, Q&A for questions, and we will get to those at a point during this presentation. So thank you all for being with us, and Jonny, it is all yours.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Robert. I'm gonna have to come back on the 8th because that sounds like a really great session, learning how to optimize LinkedIn. So might see you all back then. Everyone hearing me, seeing the screen okay?
Yep, that's good.
Good, awesome, great. Well, before we dive into the meat of this presentation, what I want us all to do is let's take a minute, let's center our thinking, and I'm gonna ask a question that it might feel a little bit painful, but don't worry, just go along with me here. I'd love to hear in the chat, what are some of the most unpleasant sales experiences that you've had as a buyer? Thinking on the buy side, when you've had to work with a salesperson and it just hasn't been fun. Tell me about that experience in 5 words or less. Take a minute here. Let's drop it on the chat. I'd love to see anything we can here. The more I get in the chat, there we go. Erica Carbine, that's great. Yep. The more I get in there, the more I can go back to these things. Okay, Melissa says she felt pressured. Yep, that's a common one that makes it very unpleasant. Slow, uncommunicative. That's good. Ashley, thank you for that. Oscar, let's see. Selling something I don't need. Increase in cost unexpectedly. Lack of transparency. Oh, Garen, not listening to me. Don't know their products. This is all really good stuff. Sydney says, not listening to my needs. Oh, Melissa, another good one. Long and dragged out. Oh, Christine, tricked into buying something very expensive. Leanne, ignoring me. All right, we've got a lot of good stuff here. Poor attitude, condescending. Whoa, lots of good stuff. This is really, really good stuff to talk about today, but I'm sorry you all have had to go through this, but just like everybody, selling can be painful. And probably what I'm going to make a prediction here is that every single one of these things in the chat has to relate with the next 4 slides. And what we're going to do is just recap 4 of the most normal, cliche, painful sales experiences. And the very first one we got in the chat was cars. So the classic used car salesman. Now, we're not here to hate on used car salesmen, but it's a cliche sales experience that we've all had to go through. This type of salesperson's very, very focused on the dollar amount. Well, how much are you looking to spend? What monthly payment do you want? And then they're willing to close the deal at any cost. They're going to close it at the cost of future business or referrals, and they'll do anything they can to push a deal across the finish line. This is not just car salesmen. This is any industry selling a product in a pushy way that's just unhelpful. The next cliche is the script robot. So someone on here said like slow and not communicative. Oftentimes that can be the script robot, thinking large company, maybe a huge call center, maybe it's an insurance provider, or even some of the newer car selling strategies of Carvana and these bigger companies where you need to talk to someone on the phone at a large company. There's lots of scripting, and it's very obvious this person has not been trained to cater to your needs. This person has been trained to read a script. The third cliche here, this is my favorite picture. It's the info dumper. Now, this is when you sit down with someone and you learn way, way more than you need to about the product or service. They teach you how the sausage is made instead of the benefits of the product, right? So this is a new salesperson who's got a ton of product knowledge, but not much training in how to navigate a sales conversation or how to actually address buyer needs, pinpoint problems along the way. And so because they're not prepared in those ways, this results in info dumping like crazy. Another place this comes into play is oftentimes, and I say this with love, but it's in the small business world. We're a small business. We've been in that world forever, but a lot of times small businesses are very obsessed with their story or their product, and it can lead to info dumping. The fourth cliche, this is the order taker. We saw a lot of it in the chat, not being very proactive at addressing needs, not communicating well. This type of salesperson, they have a menu and they wait on the buyer to pick what they want. There's no consulting, there's no guidance, there's no strategy, there's no structure to the conversation. And whether it's this cliche or any of these four cliches, all of these challenges can wreak havoc in a sales process and make buying very unpleasant as the buyer. And if these types of issues are happening in your company from a sales perspective, lots of challenges will pop up as well. What I want to do real quick before we move on is talk about what's your biggest sales challenge now. And we're not going to talk about it, but I want you to think about it. Think, what is the biggest struggle right now in closing deals and driving the revenue you want? What's coming to mind? And I would predict that oftentimes what we see here is we've got these four cliches we just talked about. These are the most unpleasant buying experiences to be a part of. But if I were to bet dollars on a connection between the most unpleasant sales situation you've been a part of and then also the sales challenges happening in your business, I would bet that the same stereotypes are popping through in ways that are hurting your sales. This happens, right? This happens to all businesses, all salespeople. Things get out of a line. The reason that is because 68% of salespeople do not follow a set structure for their sales conversations. And this is critical because it begs the question, how much revenue is your company losing because you have no structure for your sales conversations? And how many leads come in the door and out without leading to revenue and business because we've never taken the time to really sit down and really consider what our sales process should be and map out a perfect foolproof framework for our conversations. The point today, and the number one thing that I want to communicate, is that when you structure your sales conversations the right way, you can increase your bottom line. That should be a no-brainer, but the best news for all of us here is you can do this without hiring more salespeople or increasing lead flow. Of course, when you have the perfect structure for your sales calls, hiring people and increasing lead flow, that's your pathway to scaling. But if you want to increase your revenue without doing anything scale-focused, all you need to do is better structure your sales conversations. So if we don't use the right structure in our sales conversations, this puts us at big risk in our business, our revenue, our culture, our processes, everything. And lots of bad things can happen if we don't have a designed strategy for our sales conversations. The first one is our odds of closing a deal just plummet. When we don't have a great strategy, we're not able to think clearly. And so deals get away. The next thing is non-qualified leads go too far into the sales process. The third thing is the sales process is painful for your customers and salespeople. So without the right structure, think of the script robot, think of the order taker, think of the info dumper, the used car cliche. All of those salespeople were given either the wrong structure or no structure for the way they handle a sale. And because of that, it made life very painful for you as the buyer. So it's our job as business owners and as people who sell to make sure we've structured our selling in the right way so that our buyers on the other side don't feel the same way we've all felt in the chat here. Because on the flip side, if we have a winning structure for our sales calls, a lot of good things happen. Number one, closing a deal happens faster and at a higher close rate. Think about how great life would be if it could take you half as many calls to close a deal, and you could double your close rate, right? Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? The next thing is our time is spent on right fit and ideal leads. If we structure our sales conversations in a way that helps us filter through the bad fit leads, life becomes awesome, right? We're able to focus on serving the people we want to serve instead of spending and maybe wasting time and energy on people who aren't a great fit. And the third benefit of having a winning structure for your sales calls is customers don't feel sold to, they feel served. So have you ever gotten to the point in a sale when it's time, the rubber's meeting the road, it's time to close and land the plane, but you don't want them to feel sold to, and so you back up and you retract, and maybe you don't want to feel pushy, you don't want to feel like you're coercing anyone. And by the way, that means you have morals. That's a good thing. But the issue is if we don't set things up in the right way, we'll lose customers because of that mindset. When if we structure our calls in the right way, we can make our customers feel served, not sold to. Now, I haven't spent any time introducing myself really, but my name is Jonny Holsten. I'm the founder and co-founder and CEO here at Bridge Selling. Erin Foltz is also on this call. You'll meet her a little bit later at the end of this. She's our lead coach. And we know firsthand how frustrating sales challenges can be. We know this for a few reasons. Number one, we've sold for a living our whole professional lives. So we know that without closed deals, money's not coming in the door, right? We understand the frustration and stress that comes with that. The other reason is because we've also spent most of our professional lives helping businesses refine their sales. And whether it's in marketing or sales, we've seen the pain and the stress and the disaster that can come with a broken sales process. And so our mission is to fix broken sales processes everywhere. And what we do here at Bridge Selling is we help companies develop a clear structure for their sales conversations so they can have a successful and scalable sales process. By the end of today, you will have a really smooth and easy to follow blueprint for how you can either create just a perfect and successful sales process in your business, or if you're in a position where you're looking to really scale aggressively, this is the foundation to do that. It's the foundation of bringing in new people to sell for you and having them be successful right away. To get your wheels turning on maybe the outcomes of this session for you, what I want to do is talk about a few recent wins and what we've been able to do for customers over the last year or so. This is a company in the Pacific Northwest, coaching them on their sales and working with them on their sales conversations. We had a small business close a $750,000 deal in the first month of working together. This was great. This was a huge win for them. Their family-owned business, just a small team, life-changing contract. Another thing that happened is here, a company here in Phoenix, a local business, they grew their sales by 6x in less than a year. Now, I'm not talking 50K to 300K. I'm talking 3 million a month to over 20 million a month. And all of this was done just by teaching a team at scale the framework we're going to review today. The other fun thing we got to be a part of recently was helping a company that had 35 different locations in the Midwest. We created a sales consultation strategy for their 70-person sales team. So they were coming to us thinking, hey, how can we teach all of our sales reps to say the same things and navigate the conversations in the same way so that we can send our reps anywhere of our 35 locations and we know it will all be done the same way. We helped put that together for the team, and it was phenomenal. What I want to do now is ask this question again of how much revenue is your company losing because you have no structure for sales conversations. We're going to dive into solving this problem and answering this question here, but I really want us to think about it and just spend some time just focusing on this. Whether that number in your head was 100 grand a month or 100 grand a year, or you felt like you might be losing 7 figures from having poorly structured sales conversations, what we're going to talk about now is the bridge selling framework. And the bridge selling framework is a visual framework to help you do 3 things. This framework was birthed out of working with, listening to hundreds of client sales calls. And I started asking the question, and we started working together of, all right, what can we do? What sort of process can we put together that's going to help companies of any industry and almost any sales process do 3 things? Number 1 is, how can we give a sales team the highest likelihood of closing a sale? And by the way, if you're a solo ranger on this call and you see sales team, that sales team is you. The second thing we wanted to do with this framework is, how can we eliminate poor fit leads early in the sales process? So how can we make a system that gives a sales team the highest likelihood of closing a sale and eliminate poor fit leads in the beginning? The third thing is, how can we make a framework that keeps the sales process simple and easy for all parties, for the salesperson and for the buyer? And what we came up with is, we've got, what the visual you're seeing here is a bridge, right? This is the bridge selling framework. It's the idea that your customer is on the left side of this bridge, a closed deal and revenue for your business is on the right side of the bridge. And our theory is that there are 6 things that need to happen in every sales conversation and sales process to make a smooth journey across the bridge for your customer. I hope you're all ready and excited to dive in, because we're going to get into the details of the framework next. What we're looking at here is the empty bridge framework. This is an empty bridge. There's no details in this, so we need to figure out, what should we do to fill these gaps to help our customers move about the sales process. We're going to go over 6 things that go into each of these blocks. And the 6 parts can be customized in some cases per client, per sales process, per industry. But ultimately, these are the 6 things that need to happen to increase your odds of closing a sale and to eliminate poor fit leads in the process. The very first thing is, a salesperson needs to pinpoint the problem. We've got to dive deep on the problem we're solving for the customer. If we go back and we look at the chat, the amount of people who said the salesperson was not addressing my needs, that's right here. And that's why it's first. It's critical that if you're selling, that you are pinpointing the true problem you're solving for your customer. The way that this is done is by creating some kind of document that is tried and true questions, discovery questions that you ask on a sales call or in a sales consult. We've got one right here for our company. These are the 8 questions that are real home runs, and your company needs your own. Whatever questions are the most effective to really understand where your customer's coming from, that is important. What we want to do here is, when we're pinpointing the problem, we want to listen for 2 specific things. The first thing is the external problem. Why did our customer come our way? Why are they interested in our product? What led them to us? That's the external problem. But then we need to do some digging and go a little bit deeper, and we want to figure out what emotions, what stress, what fear, what pain points are they having, as well as the external problem. So before we move on in a call, we want to feel really good about understanding why our customer came to us and what emotions they're feeling because of that reason that they came to us. This is critical because we know that salespeople who ask 11 or more discovery questions have a 74% higher chance at closing a sale. So even if you end this workshop right now and you want to go increase your sales by 74%, come up with the 11 home run questions you need to ask in your discovery calls. And that's right there. There's your first step. Here's a little graph of what this looks like. The more questions we ask, the higher our close rate goes. It's very simple. We don't need to ask 30 questions, but we do want to know what 8 to 10 questions are home runs that are going to get our customer to open up about those pain points and those problems. This leads us to bridge selling principle number 1, which is, if you don't pinpoint the problem, the chances of closing a deal plummets. After pinpointing the problem, The next part of the bridge is to qualify your lead. This is very important because I think back to probably 90% of the frustrations in my life and my clients' lives have been letting a customer, a client in the door that's not a qualified customer. And the type of chaos that unleashes in your sales process and your operations and your culture, it's not great. It's not fun. No one likes to deal with it. And so the reason we put this early on in the conversation is we really want to know, how can we rule out a customer or prospect when they come our way? We can learn the problems they have, figure out whether or not it's a good fit. If they're not a good fit, we need to disqualify them. But if they are a good fit, we need to qualify them. This is very important because marketing is critical, but the data tells us that less than 5% of marketing generated leads convert. This is why it's so important to have a great marketing message and a good marketing agency and a good marketing department who can help increase this number as much as possible. But what this visual right here tells us is this is the visual representation of how many leads that come in the door typically close. And it's less than 5%, it's just about 3%. So what we say is very critical to helping stop the movement of poorly qualified leads is we want every company to have a simple definition of what a sales qualified lead is. This can be a 1 or 2 sentence definition that all your salespeople are trained on. And it's just a filter that when leads come in the door, it's a simple way to accept or disqualify a lead. The way we view this is we call it the bridge fit formula. And so if you don't quite know how to create a qualified lead definition, we look at it this way. A qualified lead should have 4 things. The first is a problem you can solve. That's part 1 of the bridge. The second thing is they need to have the authority and the budget to make the buying decision. The third thing that they need is they need to have a timeline that aligns with your capacity or your timeline. So you need to know when they're making the decision and if it aligns with your capacity to fulfill. And then the fourth thing, if you're building a wait list of customers or you're picking and choosing who you work with, the fourth criteria would be the highest likelihood of success or the best possible case study for your business. So even right now, if you need to get very clear on who an ideal customer is for your business, I would write these 4 things down. Problem you solve, authority to make a buying decision with the budget. The third thing is a timeline that aligns with your capacity. And the fourth thing is the best possible case study for your business. Take those things, go write them on a whiteboard, get your team together, and by the end of a conversation, you'll have a simple definition of who's an ideal fit lead. By this point in our sales conversation, we've pinpointed the problem, we've qualified our lead. Next, it's time to talk about our product and our service, right? It's all about the customer, but at some point we have to introduce what we do and how we can actually help them. And this is part 3 of the bridge. So if we have a really good idea of why our lead or prospect came to us, if we've qualified them, they're an ideal fit customer, it's going to be time to talk about what we do and how we can help them. And one thing that we want to point out here, which going back to the chat and the engagement earlier, was so many people said that salespeople aren't addressing their needs. This is reflected in the chat. It's also reflected in the data of 72% B2B buyers and 87% of B2C buyers feel like sales reps do not offer relevant solutions to your needs. That's crazy, guys. This is really mind-boggling numbers. If you're B2C, if almost 9 out of every 10 customers that come your way statistically are inclined to feel like you're not offering a relevant solution, that's not okay. That's a revenue killer. What this looks like in a visual graphic is, if a bullseye on a target is closing a sale, it needs to be a solution to their problem. So when you're discovering a lot about them, you're digging deep in their pain points, and in part 1 of the bridge, when you're pinpointing the problem, whatever problems you pick up, when it's time to talk about your solution, your job as the salesperson or your sales team's job is to lead with the features and benefits of your product that solve the problem. What you see here is all the arrows that miss the target. That represents when a salesperson becomes the info dumper and they talk about feature, benefit, feature. We have this, we have that, we. The joke is the 3 little pigs crying we all the way home. if all you're doing is info dumping features and benefits, and you're skipping over the ones, or you're deprioritizing the ones that actually solve the problem for your customer is going to feel like you're not paying attention and like you're not listening to them. It's critical when it's time to talk about our service, we lead with the solutions to the problem. You can fit in all the rest of it as you go, but lead with a solution to the problem. And this is bridge principle number 3. Your solution should match your customer's true pain points. That's why pinpointing the problem at the start is so important, because if we don't understand that pain point, we're not in a position to sell a solution to it. And that gets us in a weird situation where we're trying to think through, well, what can I grab and sell to this person, or what might make sense, instead of just going deep on the problem so we know exactly what to recommend for them. And by the way, if you go deep on the problem with your customer and you find out that you can't solve their problem, this is ethical sales 101. You send them to someone who can. And if you realize their problem is not a fit for your solution, then you're going to save a lot of time and energy working with a bad fit customer, and you're going to be viewed favorably in the eyes of that customer forever, because you're going to point them somewhere where they can actually solve their problem. At this point in our sales calls, we've pinpointed the problem, we've qualified the lead, we've matched the solution with their problem. Now it's time to educate and overcome. So what this looks like is maybe you've described your product or your solution, and then you've given them all the important info, how it could solve their problem, what it looks like. This is where we stop in our conversation and we say, I've done a lot of explaining about our product or about our service. What questions do you have about everything we've talked about so far? It's very important at this point in the conversation, we don't just say, hey, any questions? Or do you have any questions for me? That's a yes/no response that invites our customer to say, no, I'm good. And then we move forward. But we need to invite conversation. We should never stray away from objections, tough questions, good dialogue, because that's what helps us build trust. And we all know people don't buy from someone they don't trust. This is important because 40 to 60% of deals are lost to customers who express intent to purchase, but ultimately fail to act, oftentimes due to unaddressed concerns or objections. So think of this, when you've been on the buying end and you have a conversation about a product, and then the salesperson says, any questions? You say no, and the call ends. And then that night you're thinking, well, what about this? What about that? That's when the creeping doubts pop up, and that's where buyers ghost and go away. So if you're ending calls, any questions for me? No? Okay. Have a great day. Let me know if you're interested. That's where you're losing 40 to 60% of potential business. What this looks like is an iceberg. And above the water there's your sales conversation. That's everything you're talking about. There's the dialogue between the buyer and the seller. And then below the water is unspoken objections. Our job as salespeople and as leaders of a sales operation is to set our team up with everything they need to raise the level of that iceberg so that all the unspoken objections can come to light, so we can properly educate our buyer and overcome objections. This leads us to bridge selling principle 4, which is always be ready to educate on your product and proactively address tough questions. Bring them to light. Bring them to light. Have that dialogue. Go deep. By now, we're through 4 out of the 6 parts of our bridge selling framework. The 5th part of the framework is clear next steps. This is arguably the most important part aside from pinpointing the problem in my eyes. This is because data tells us that close rates decline by 71% when next steps are not discussed on a first call. So if you're on a first call with a customer and you don't set clear next steps at the end of it, the chances of them returning to a second conversation drop by 71%. This is because clear next steps clear the fog, is the way I like to say it. If a client or a customer has any doubts or concerns about what comes next, clear next steps, clear the fog. So we need to end every single conversation with clear next steps. The gold standard of this is if we can get really, really clear on our customer's timeline and when they're likely to buy or when they're ready to buy, and we reverse engineer a 3-step plan from that timeline. That's the best way to do it. This looks like this. This is a lot like our earlier graph, but clear next steps on the left, close rate much higher, no clear next steps, we can see it right here. And that line going down is revenue into your company. Clear next steps, keep the deal going. That's bridge selling principle number 5. So I hope we're ready for the grand finale here. We're part 5 out of 6 in the bridge selling framework. And part 6 is close or schedule. And now when you see this word close, this is where a lot of us naturally are thinking, no, 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 no. And we start to think of some of the caricatures that we reviewed at the beginning, right? The used car salesman stereotype. There's lots of great car salesmen out there, but the stereotype of being forced or coerced or pressured into a close. I don't remember the name of who said it in the chat earlier, but several people said pressured. And so when we hear the word close, we often think, like, I just don't want anyone to feel pressured. We're not pushy. We're not like that in our company. And that's okay. Again, that means you have a conscience. But there's a different way to view this, where we believe every single sale should end in some sort of close. You're either closing the deal or you're closing the next conversation in the next meeting. And if we look backwards at the bridge here, if we're clear on the problem we're solving, we have a qualified lead, we've matched them with a great solution, we've had healthy dialogue about the process and overcome objections, we've outlined clear next steps that align around the timeline of our buyer. When it's time to close, this isn't a tactic. This isn't coercion. What this is simple yes or no questions, where early in the bridge, we want to ask open-ended questions, but at the end, we want to ask yes or no. We just want to give our buyer the opportunity to opt in. And that's by saying yes, no. So would you like me to send the contract? Would you like to schedule the next steps call? Would you like to meet again to review this with your partners? Yes or no questions, and you give the buyer the opportunity to opt out or opt in. Now, if somebody opts out and says no, here's your option. You can go back to either reviewing the problem to make sure you fully understand the problem, or you can go back to education and overcoming objections. If you've done all that and the answer still is no, you have done your job, and that's okay. But what I want to show you here is a visual of the challenges that come up when we don't schedule, we either don't close or we don't schedule the next conversation. On the left side of this visual, we have the first call. This is your first sales call. And if we say, okay, thanks for the chat, let me know if you have any questions, bye, and you hang up the call and you end the Zoom meeting or you leave the meeting, maybe this customer is very interested, but you didn't schedule the second call. So what the dots in the middle of this image reflect are all the times you have to follow up. Data tells us it takes 5 to 7 follow-ups to get someone from a first call to a second call. And so that's why part 6 of the bridge is so critical. If on the first call, we can schedule the second call, it takes 30 seconds, we save ourselves exponential follow-up. And what it looks like is this, straight to the second call. You can always nurture, you can always follow up with some value throughout. This is what it looks like, straight to the second call. Again, this is our final principle here. Every call should end with a close, either the deal or the next conversation. So let's take a look at our final bridge. We've got pinpoint the problem, qualify the lead, match the solution, educate and overcome, provide clear next steps, and then either close the deal or schedule the next conversation. My question now is, as we start to wind down some of this content, we'll head to the Q&A, is where are your gaps when you look at this bridge? Oftentimes what we see is companies are very strong in 2 or 3 of these areas, but they're very weak or they're struggling in at least 2 or 3 others. And oftentimes 1 or 2 deficiencies in the bridge can absolutely kill a sales process and just be a revenue killer. So we really want to make sure everyone feels like they're clear on the whole bridge. So my question, where are your gaps? Think through that a little bit. Take a minute to reflect and to figure out, what might this look like? One thing before we head to quick Q&A in a minute here is we want to show you what a custom bridge looks like. This is an example for a senior living company. And typically when we work with a company, we will customize at least 3 parts of the bridge. So this is something that would look a little bit different for a senior living company here, where for qualify the lead, we have very specific criteria in part 2. for part 3, which is match the solution, we'd be giving a tour of the right floor plan for that potential resident. Step 4 with educate and overcome. For senior living, that could be a Q&A with loved ones. Step 5 and 6 stay the same, clear next steps or sign paperwork and schedule next meeting, right? This is just a high level visual of what a custom bridge looks like. What I'm going to do now is hand it over to Erin Foltz, who's our head coach here at Bridge Selling. She's a brilliant communicator and a great coach, and she's going to talk a little bit about what it looks like to actually take this bridge framework and how you can turn it into a very objective scoring rubric for your sales conversations. Erin, I'll hand it over to you, and you go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jonny. So one of the things that the bridge selling framework makes possible is a really simple way to score and measure the quality of your sales calls, which is really helpful for measuring the growth of your team as they are taking and using this framework in the sales process. And so what this looks like is something like this. So each call is worth 20 points using the bridge, and we use a red, yellow, and green scoring system, which indicates whether or not that step in the bridge was executed properly by the salesperson. And so when we can score like this and a salesperson can visually see how they're doing on their sales calls, it highlights the gaps and areas that they need to work on, and it highlights the things that they're doing really well. It helps you close those gaps in their performance and in the quality of the conversations they're having. And when you do that, you can increase your close rates, which ultimately, of course, increases your bottom line. So several benefits of the scoring process is that, one, it allows you to benchmark your team's quality and it allows you to track performance, but it also provides a structured way to train and coach your team, which brings us to the bridge selling or bridge coaching piece. And so this is where the bridge scoring becomes really powerful, is that it allows us as coaches, if we're working with a client, to provide very tailored feedback and coaching to each salesperson based on where they need to improve. Because we believe at Bridge Selling that the best sales teams, they train like sports teams. It's not enough to become just familiar with the framework. So learning the framework today is the first step. You have now this understanding of this framework that you can use, but the real power in it, and when you really start seeing results, happens when you take the framework and it becomes habit for your sales team, kind of like athletes build muscle memory, which is why the coaching piece is a really critical part to our clients' success. And it starts with learning the framework. And so we do teaching and training, coaching and training. We teach the framework, and then in a group scenario, and then we work alongside individual salespeople, also in group settings, to really coach them up to master the bridge. So they're scoring all green. That's our goal. They're scoring all green on those calls, which equals an increase in sales and close rates. And so when you take these three things together, the framework, the scoring, and the coaching, it becomes this fantastic ecosystem, or almost like a playbook. If we want to keep the train like a sports team coaching metaphor going, it becomes this playbook that you can use to really develop a culture of sales excellence within your team. So the three things pair very nicely. The other piece that we add in coaching, Jonny mentioned it earlier, I believe, but this idea of magic transitions. Very rarely does a sales conversation move linearly from left to right across the bridge. More often, it's kind of like you're jumping from one thing to the other, because we're dealing with other humans, right? Like there's this dynamic of the other person, the customer in the mix here. So it's not so formulaic that you go step one, step two, there's some order to it, but you're often jumping around. And so magic transitions is one of the things we help our clients develop. It's very custom for them so their team can seamlessly move from one part of the bridge to the other to have a flexible but really effective sales conversations. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Jonny. He's going to finish out with how we continue to do this work with clients, and a fantastic tool you guys can use that's free to measure your current quality of your sales conversations.
Thanks, Aaron. That was great. And yeah, the part to before you can really score, you can score a conversation. I would encourage all of you, take this general framework, go listen to a recording of a sales call at your company and score it. See how it looks, red, yellow, green on each part. But really, to get a truly accurate and really dialed in call, what is important is a custom bridge. So building the bridge starts with an in-depth sales process analysis. We come in and we look at your team, your product, your customer, and then we develop your bridge selling framework and train and coach your team. So the idea is you have a custom bridge in your company's internal language that fits with your buyer and your product. And from there, it's just a matter of coaching and raising everyone's skill set to where they're scoring 100% on the bridge. We do have a cool tool that everyone here can use today. Right now, it's a sales call quality score. So much like you can score the quality of a one-off conversation, what this assessment is it's 34 questions. They're yes/no questions. It takes less than 5 minutes. And all it is a yes, no through the 34 questions. And at the end of it, you'll get a report that gives you an actual score on what the likely quality of your sales conversations is. So you can see this report here on the screen. This company scored 46%. That means there's a lot of upside. If we can change the structure in their conversations without hiring or increasing leads, there's upside right there. So I'd encourage everybody to go ahead and take this assessment, send it to your sales leaders, send it to your salespeople and see what they think about it. And I think you're going to find the report very insightful. You'll get a PDF emailed to you that's got multiple pages on which parts did you score high on, which parts did you score low on. From there, you can really figure out what your right next step should be to improve your sales. Most importantly with this is it's going to tell you where you're strong already so that you can just focus on the areas of weakness. And that's why we love this assessment so much. This brings us to our Q&A. We've got about 12 minutes here. I hope this is enough time to offer some insight. And Robert, you go ahead and pump the brakes whenever it's time to go. But I'll turn it over to the Q&A in the chat and the next steps. I'm going to move a slide here where you can get the assessment on the left. And then if you know you're ready just to talk with Aaron and I, you can always go to the QR code on the right. But again, Robert, thanks for having us. This has been great. And we're here to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, glad to have you with us. Great presentation. Everybody, folks, post in the Q&A your questions. This is our open time to ask questions of the selling process to Jonny or anything that may come up related to that. So I see we do have one question in there already. I'll read it out. It says, as a software engineering consulting or consisting almost entirely of engineers, we do not have a dedicated sales teams. How do I help encourage our team, particularly leaders, to address the feeling of being too salesy? Could there be advantages of having a technical sales team in addition to our engineering teams?
Yes, and I can't see that question. I don't know if that was DM'd or if that's further up in the chat, so I'm sorry, but
it's in the Q&A. If you click at the bottom of the Q&A, it'll show up.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one,
Aaron,
Jonny.
Go for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Robbie, there's really two parts of your question here. The first part being leaders that are feeling like things are too salesy and not wanting to come across as too salesy. In a lot of ways, this is a mindset shift. It is having them understand that people are coming to you because you can solve a problem for them. Just like Jonny talked about that first part of the bridge. So when you can pinpoint the problem, if you are positioned to solve that problem for them, you really are serving them by selling to them if it's a right fit. If they're a right fit lead and you can truly solve the problem. And so some of it's just working with them on their mindset around how they view sales. And a great way to do that is by asking questions that help them uncover and get to the point of being able to say, oh, we're actually serving them by selling to them because we're solving a problem, is a fantastic way to begin to address that. The second part of your question about having advantages of a technical sales team in addition to the engineering teams, it depends. Like I would say my gut answer is like, yeah, of course it would be helpful if you have capacity that you're trying to fill, and it would free up those engineering teams. But without knowing more about your business, the goals of your company, what your sales volume looks like, all of those things, it's hard to give you a definitive answer. But if you think that you go, hey, we have capacity, we need to add more, we need to increase our sales, and our engineering team is feeling burdened by sales conversations, then that would be a great time to start thinking about adding someone.
A thought that I have here would be, yeah, if your sales team, if your engineers are burdened with doing the selling as well, you could very easily put a structure in place where you've got 1 or 2 salespeople who are fielding all the inbound calls, and what their job is to get very, very clear on the problems that your software is going to solve. And then part of your bridge, part 6, could be schedule the conversation with the engineering team, so you're at least shrinking the amount of calls that the engineering team has to be on. And by the time they get to the engineering team, they're very prepped on what a custom demo would look like or what the problems are. And that way, in that first conversation, you can rule out the bad fit leads. Because I would be curious, if we spent a day with you, if we could determine part of why your engineers are overwhelmed is because they're probably trying to cater to maybe more people coming through the sales process than there should be. So there's a few elements to this question, but I think Aaron answered it super well.
There's another question in here about the points breakdown of the bridge, which we could go through really quick. Do you want to tackle that, Jonny?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The baseline way of how we score is pinpointing the problem is 5 points. The rest are 3. So that's where you get 20. If a salesperson makes no attempt to navigate a certain part of the bridge, you get 0.0 credit. If the salesperson makes an attempt, but maybe doesn't quite, it's not a successful attempt, but they tried, that's where the yellow comes in, and that's half credit. And then where the salesperson makes an attempt and they succeed, that's where you get full credit in green. And part of this framework is the magic transitions are really how you score. If a salesperson uses a magic transition the right way and navigates that conversation effectively, they'll score green. And typically when there's a red, it's because the magic transition wasn't used. With every client, there's a one pager on how exactly to score all green or have a perfect score. So part of that's custom to each client. Maybe the weighting of the score could be different, but that's the breakdown there. So as you're scoring on your own, 5 and then 3 for the rest.
Yep.
So we got a great question in there. It says, for priority number 2, could you elaborate on the 4th aspect case study for your company?
Yes, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. And the bridge that we call the bridge fit formula, which is the problem you solve, the ability to make the buying decision, the authority and budget, really, there's your BANT. 3rd is timeline. And then 4th is case study. So the way you could look at this would be the technical way we view it is the highest likelihood of success. So that means if you say yes to this client, what is the result that you're going to get for them or the impact on your business? So most importantly, the first 3 just help you rule out bad fit leads. But if you have a wait list, let's say you're at capacity and you have to hand pick who to work with next quarter or 2 quarters from now. That 4th criteria could be the deal size. It could be the industry of the client. It could be something that makes them just a home run case study for you guys. Like our example would be this. If we had a wait list and we had to choose the 4th criteria, which would be the highest likelihood of success or the best case study, would be like a sales team that is performing the lowest. We would want to get in there with someone who's performing the lowest so we could come out of that project saying, we had another great case study or we made a big impact is really part of it. So the 4th element is for people who are at capacity, looking to get very specific about industry or client type. Aaron, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you hit it. It's just like, how likely are they to succeed? Some of it can be, I mean, for us, like coaching is such a key part of what we do. And so for us, if we had a team where we go, they're scoring really low, performing low performance, we know we could help them, but they're not open to coaching. Like they're just very resistant to feedback and being coached, their sales team is, we're going to have an uphill battle the whole way. And that's going to be very difficult to see the level of success we know that's possible, versus somebody who they welcome feedback, their team's ready to be coached, and they want to have a high level of performance. We're going to see different results purely based on the people that we're dealing with, not so much the company or what they're selling or their process. So,
anything else?
We got like 2 questions. I think we can have just enough time to hit those. Says, what are some best practices to qualify my questions before the first call?
Well, could you read that one more time?
What are some best practices to qualifying my questions before the first call?
So I view this a couple different ways. This could be like lead filtering before the conversation, which would be maybe on your intake forms on the website. This would be like if you only want to work with a certain size company or company in a certain industry or certain revenue point based on what you sell, I would put those things in there, like headcount, revenue, timeline, some of the simple things that don't feel invasive but are important for you to know is what I would be putting on like lead forms before a call. And then for the call, the question we sit down with the client and say, what are the most impactful questions you ask a customer? Just make a list of the top 10 or 12 questions that get them to open up the most. And between your lead filtering on like a lead gen form and those questions on a sales call, you should save yourself a ton of time with forfeit leads. And these are documents written in pencil, not pen. So you can adjust those questions as you refine them over time on both sides of this.
And then the last question we will have for today says, in one of your slides, you mentioned only a small number of marketing leads actually turn into something. Do you have any recommendations to improve the quality of those marketing leads?
Yeah, I mean, this is Aaron and my background. So we would recommend using the StoryBrand framework. It's a marketing filter. And what that really is your whatever part 2 of your bridge is, your qualified customer. The goal is that all of your talking points speak very clearly and specifically to that person about the problems they have and how your company helps them. So I would go read the book, Building a Story Brand, or go listen to some podcasts about the StoryBrand framework. That's a huge part of increasing that number. You can also find a marketing agency that uses the StoryBrand framework, and we have a really great marketing agency partner we can point you to. So if that's something that you're concerned about now, you can reach out to us in any way, and we can connect you with someone to help with that. But getting very clear on your ideal customer is important first, because no marketing message can be effective without that clarity.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And that puts us right at time. So we're right where we need to be. Great way to wrap up. And again, thank you, Jonny and Aaron and Allison, for this presentation today and monitoring the chat and the questions. And we appreciate you being with us and sharing that great information. We hope everybody attending got some great information out of this. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up, and we hope to see everybody in 2 weeks for our next boot camp on April 8th. Until then, have a great day.
Thanks, Robert. See you guys.